Indiana, much like other red states across the country, is proposing an anti-critical race theory piece of legislation. And the details of that legislation are pretty horrific, and I'll get to those details in just a moment. But before I do, you should know that a state senator just very transparently told a teacher that he should be impartial to Nazis while teaching about Nazism. If you don't believe me, here's a video from the hearing where they were debating this proposal. It starts off with a teacher who is concerned about what the legislation would mean for him and the job he does.
We're not neutral on Nazism. We take a stand in the classroom against it, and it matters that we do.
I'm not discrediting as a person Marxism, Nazism, fascism. I'm not discrediting any of those isms out there. And I have no problem with the education system providing instruction on the existence of those isms. I believe that we've gone too far when we take a position on those isms as it relates to, we need to be impartial. Again, I'm gonna use this term. We need to be the purveyors of reason. We just provide the facts. The kids formulate their own viewpoints. When we start to tell them how to think, even though we may have strong convictions, I'm with you on those particular isms. You and I are on the same side. But I'm not sure it's right for us to determine how that child should think. And that's where I'm trying to provide the guardrails.
Yeah, so let me just, make things a little easier for this moron to understand, okay? It is unreasonable to be impartial in regard to Nazis who murdered more than 6 million Jews during the Holocaust, okay? Being impartial is unreasonable. And for those of you who might think like, oh, maybe he's just concerned about indoctrination. No. This is a guy who's had ties to right-wing militia groups. I'm talking about the state senator here. His name is Scott Baldwin. So it's very clear what his intentions are. But to give you further information, further context into the story, comparing Nazism to Marxism is ridiculous. And I think he mentioned Marxism on purpose to make it seem like, I'm one of these guys who's, there's no bias here. There's definitely a bias. Scott Baldwin, the state senator, also later amended his comments after it led to backlash. He said, Nazism, Marxism, and fascism are a stain on our world history and should be regarded as such. And I failed to adequately articulate that in my comments. That's true, he failed to adequately articulate that Nazism is awful, horrific, just indeed a stain in history. But what he also failed to do is take note of how the policy that he's championing right now erases any real education, substantive education in regard to the treatment of various disenfranchised groups of people. And we know what his intentions are. Baldwin uttered his jaw-dropping instruction at a legislative hearing on State Senate Bill 167, which would require schools to form committees, including parents who are not experts in education or curriculum, that was my statement there, to include parents to review all curricula. It would also prohibit schools from teaching a variety of concepts related to sex, race, ethnicity, religion, color, and national origin as part of an assault on critical race theory. And so look, I don't have kids, but if I had a kid, I don't want random parents deciding what the curriculum of my child's school should be or will be. They don't get to be these individuals who are not experts in history, who are not experts on education, should play absolutely no role in determining what the curriculum should be in our public education system. If they don't like what their children are learning, they are free to homeschool their kids. They are free to put their kids in private schools, but they don't get to be the arbiters. The reason why we have experts in education making these decisions is because it makes no sense to allow any ideological group or any political group to make those decisions based on their political beliefs. When you have a system like that, it leads to, honestly, more morons in the country who don't even have an understanding of our own nation's history. Cenk.
Yeah, so I think there's something else going on here that is even more problematic. I'm gonna get to that in a second. But first, on the parents issue, I think it's a little bit more nuanced. So here's what I mean by that. So one side says parents shouldn't be involved at all. That was partly what Anna was saying. And I obviously understand the reason for that. The other side is saying the parents should make every decision. Well, so let me show you how both of that breaks down. So when it comes to sex education, Anna might be right on the facts and the logic, but the parents are just going to be too emotionally invested to not get involved in how they teach sex education. I'm trying to be practical and realistic on that, right? On the other end of the spectrum, math is math. And if the parents all agree that 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4, it still does. Their opinion is irrelevant. Now, you could decide, here's how it could be relevant. As a community, maybe you can decide we're gonna teach our kids things that aren't true. Just gonna make a decision. We're gonna teach them math that's all wrong. So they'll all think that 2 + 2 = 5, and we can go on and on. It's a curious choice, but I guess you could make that choice, and people make it on an individual level all the time. And if you think I'm taking an absurd example, well, how math and science are very closely related because they both deal with verifiable facts. And right now, Republicans are very much against teaching verifiable facts from science, including, and you're gonna all know that this is true, including evolution. So they say, well, it's a theory. They don't understand science at all, right? And they say, well, your scientists show me all these facts. On the other hand, my religious text from 2,500 years ago says something else, and now I think it's debatable. So how do you resolve that as a society? Well, that's a difficult question, okay?
I don't think it's that difficult. Let me tell you how you do solve it, because you gave an example that I think is a great one, right? The example of sex education. So let me talk about my experience with sex education in the LAUSD, a public school system in Los Angeles. Even in uber liberal California, even in the LAUSD system, parents during sex education were sent a note letting them know, yo, we're gonna teach your kids about their bodies, about the birds and the bees. If you wanna opt out, you have the right to opt out. That way, parents who are actually smart and want their kids to get a decent education are still able to ensure that their kids get that decent education, and the parents who are panicky and emotional can go ahead and opt out. But to allow right-wingers to implement their ideological concerns, which will impact every single student within the school system, is wrong. They don't get to be the deciders. I'm sorry, but people who actually want to provide a decent education for their kids are also spending a considerable amount of their resources in the form of taxes to ensure that their kids get the education that they need. So why is it that only one ideology gets to be the arbiter in these various red states? What about all the parents who want a decent education for their kids?
Yeah, look, I think the bare minimum is at least don't teach them things that aren't true, but we can't even get an agreement on that. So now to this specific case, because it's so outrageous, just as a matter of logic, I want to just point out something to be a stickler for rationality here. There's a difference between Nazism and fascism. You could say, and apparently now some right wingers are saying, fascism not so bad. That's just a form of government, and it involves one authoritarian leader and serving corporate interests, and everybody else gets crushed. And we kind of like that. Okay, that's your opinion, man. But you can't say Nazism not so bad. They put people in gas chambers. They burned people alive. They killed 13 million people and did it based on. Are you real? Do Republicans really want us to debate whether that's okay? That's insane. No, Nazism not okay. By the way, you could also say the same exact thing for the left wing. You could say, hey, maybe you think it's debatable whether we should have communism or Marxism, but it is not debatable whether Stalin and Mao were good guys. They were not. And by the way, very few, a tiny handful, but now they finally have appeared on the internet, are making the argument Stalin not so bad. They're just as insane in my opinion, okay? So no, killing 20 million people, pretty bad, pretty bad. That's not debatable, okay? So which finally leads to the most important political point here. This is not an accident. We've been showing it to you on the show, and I've been telling you that it's a pattern. It is Republicans throughout the country are beginning to say fascism, not so bad. They're starting to make a real case for it. Now, if you're in that camp, Jesus Christ, so you think that some rando who's your leader should take away our freedoms and rule in an authoritarian fashion. That is what fascism is. That is what it is. Okay, I mean, that's the most ironic argument coming from freedom-loving Republicans, but they're making it all across the country. Democracy bad, they're saying, and now they're beginning to say fascism good. You just saw it with your own eyes.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.